Hello there, how are you doing? I am Ash. Welcome to another Jeddah Workshop build video. I know I said I would do one of these every Friday again after promising the last time and failing, and I didn't do that again because it's me. I'm sorry, but what more do you want? This is a Clone Trooper Phase 2 realistic style with macro binoculars in the paint style finish of Waxer from the Battle of Umbara. Enjoy.
Okay, let's get straight into it, shall we? So this is, you'll have seen me build helmets before in my other videos. I basically glue all the pieces together and weld them with a soldering iron. And this is a newer method which I'll show on another video, where basically I use 3D printer UV resin and I put it in my air compressor. So I basically vaporize it and I spray it on the helmet and I cure it with a 405 nm UV light. Very important that the UV wavelength matches the actual printer resin. So 3D printing with resin is a completely different process to printing with PLA, but because it's a liquid which reacts to light and turns to solid, it's a really good method for filling your printer lines rather than using Bondo or some sort of car body filler. In the past I've just used a sponge to apply it, but then when I got my air compressor I thought, hey, I can turn this into a vaporizer and spray it on like paint. It is a little thick as a liquid, so I dilute it down just a little bit with isopropyl alcohol, spray it and cure it. It does take a bit of time because you have to stop and cure it each time and build it up in layers. But it still, to me, is the fastest, easiest, most efficient method of filling 3D printer lines to date. I will obviously be testing different things as I go along. Also, if you're thinking about doing this, don't do it on my advice, because UV resin basically reacts with sunlight as a liquid, and if you turn it into a vapor, that's going to get in your skin, in your lungs. I literally have a fan on, door open, so it's all blowing out. I have a ventilator mask, and I'm still not 100% sure how safe that is. So please don't follow some dumb guy on the internet just because he's doing it. I just wanted to explain how I do it, and I do this regularly now because it just is the fastest method. But basically, once you've got your whole print covered in UV resin, I basically do about 3 thin layers all over, and then I do extra layers where the print is at its worst, which is usually the very top and the very bottom where the supports have been. Here I do about 6 or 7 layers, or just any areas where the print is bad and needs a bit more filling, I do a few more layers, but overall about 3. And then I clean it all off with isopropyl alcohol, just so it's not all gunky and doesn't clog up the sandpaper. And basically then it's just ready to sand. So here I am doing its first sand, and I start off with a 60 grit sandpaper, just to break it in. I don't go crazy with this, as in concentrate on one area for a while, because you'll end up sanding too much resin off. But I find if I start with 120, it's not enough. The sandpaper is not harsh enough to cut through, and I end up having to do it all over again. So I do a quick blast with 60 grit all over to break it in. I then switch to 120 and do it all over again. And that's like my proper sanding layer. That really gives you like a feel of areas where you need to concentrate on to smooth them out a bit more, spend a bit more time on it. And once I've done 120, I do 240 all over, and then I might do a 400 as well, just to get this initial layer super smooth and see what's what. As you can see on the back here, there is like a crack. That's because that's the resin, and it's because I sprayed it and cured it like too fast. basically I should have cured it for a bit longer before doing the next layer, because what has happened is there's got an air bubble trapped in there, and then I've cured resin on the top of it, and then it's split, so I'm just going to have to do it again basically. So that's why it's important to do this slowly and methodically. Spray a layer, you cure it for at least 10 seconds, if not longer, then you spray another layer and you cure it for 10 seconds. So, you know, although this is one of the fastest methods, you still have to take your time. You know, you have to slow down. So here he is, all sanded down to 400 grit, and you can see this is me fixing those areas with the air bubbles, or probably adding some more layers on the very bottom again where the support material has been. So this is the UV resin in my air compressor. I'm just spraying it all over here. It looks like it needs another layer. Maybe I didn't do enough initially. So there is still some finessing to do. It's not like you just spray it and it's smooth. You know, it's still, you have to assess what's going on once you've sanded it. And I'm just fixing, you see that crack at the back there. So I'm just going over with a few more layers of resin, just to fill those areas in and get it nice and smooth. Alright, so that's what it looks like with his next few layers of resin. See, there's a big ding in there. I think I melted that by accident with a soldering iron. And a few just dodge areas which I wasn't able to sand down smooth, so I've had to build it up to then sand back down smooth. So you guessed it, sanding. And it looks like I'm probably down to about 400 grit again here, getting it nice and smooth. You can see the areas that are poking through. That's a good sign. That means you're kind of balanced down, but obviously you don't want to sand so much resin off that you get back down to the bare raw print, because then you've gone too low. So, you know, it swings and roundabouts, but it's sort of a hard thing to explain, and you just get it more by feel. You know when to stop, and you know when to stop sanding, and you know when to fill it up. So when you're happy with your print, get your just normal grey primer paint and spray it all over. I have a weird method where I spray all the upright positions first by hand, like holding the helmet, and then I stick it on the stand and I spray where my hand was, because obviously once it's on the stand, these bits are harder to get to, and you don't want to be touching the model with wet paint, because you're going to get fingerprints all over it. So once I sprayed all the uppy parts, I spray all the downy parts, and then I spray all the sidey parts. So I just work my way around the helmet, just doing, I literally just do one layer of grey primer. And this is where you really start to see all that hard work of filling and sanding, you know, come to pass, and it's rewarding because you've basically got a jaggedy print down to this beautiful smooth surface. So if you got to this stage, well done. And there he is, looking all smooth and beautiful. Alright, so now, because we use grey primer as a base coat, it's actually the perfect colour for the grey colouring on the actual helmet. So before I spray it white, I want to keep these grey areas. So all I'm doing is masking out here for the nose grill and the headband that goes around the side, the top of the helmet, and the very back part beneath the dial. And now it's time to get this guy sprayed white. So I use Montana Gold paint, spray paint. Gold is the brand name, and I think it's called a Shock White. I use this on basically all clone troopers as a base coat, no matter what, you know, colour the accents are and all that. It's just a really good high quality white paint. You can see I'm doing my weird handheld uppy method here, so I spray all the surfaces that are facing down, you know, the uppy bits, I spray upwards. Stick it on the stand where my hand's been, spray that part, then I do all the downy parts, including inside the mouth there, the downward layer surface of the visor, the cheeks, the headband, everywhere that's pointed down, and I go around the whole helmet, and then I spray the sides. And I will do at least 2 coats of white here, You know, spray the whole helmet once, doing a light layer, leave it to dry for 20 minutes, come back, do another layer, and then check that, because it is easy to miss parts even if you are being methodical. I sometimes do 3 coats just to make sure, but 2's generally enough. Here I am spraying the accessories, so I've got them filled, sanded and primed, and they're ready to go white as well. So this is a working articulated macrobinocular set that I designed. So I used my base phase 2 helmet and then basically cut the ears off, cut some holes into it to use actual real nuts and bolts, because I find 3D printed plastic bolts just don't work. They snap even if you print them at sort of 100% infill. It's just not strong enough for articulated movements. So they're the only components that you'll need as extra, other than like a plastic visor, is some nuts and bolts. I tend to use M4. I can't remember the exact length here, but you can figure it out. You can have a look at my website and it's all in the description. So I separate all the other accessories by colour. So these are the rebreathers, the comlink ear blocks, and the rims, the black rims that go around the macrobinoculars. So it's just always best to be efficient when you're painting, so you're not wasting time waiting for one thing to dry and then you forget another piece. Like, I always separate things into the same colour and just do them all together. Okay, on the helmet itself, you can see that I masked up for the black rim, and again I just use pinstripe paper tape to go around the black rim, and then I use a wider masking tape, and then I just use carrier bags to protect the rest of the helmet. I spray it all black. So that's done. And now I've moved on to the little decal on Wax's helmet. So I'm sort of doing this a mixture of stenciling and by hand. To get the main shape, what I did is found a photo online and then downloaded it, enlarged it to what I thought would be about the right size and printed it off, and then I cut around that with scissors, stuck it to the helmet and drew around that to get the overall shape of it. I then masked that off and sprayed it this beautiful kind of aqua turquoisey tealy colour. I'm now masking off for the orange 212 colours. I think what I should have done is do this first and then the crazy little alien turtle design thing, whatever he is. I don't know the actual species. I should have done that second, but you know, lessons learned. So again, I use pinstripe tape to get a finer line, and then just bog standard fat masking tape to go on the edge of that, and just get all your, when you're masking for stenciling, do your initial kind of fine lines, but then make sure every single bit is pressed down, because paint can travel around corners and under gaps, and you don't want it messing that beautiful white helmet of yours. Okay, now it's spray time. I'm using 94 paints here. 94 is the brand name. They do really sick colours, and really high quality. They tend to be a nice matte finish, so they work really well for helmets that you're gonna weather, because a matte finish just looks kind of a bit worn and aged to begin with. And in building my last Cody helmet, I really wanted to get the orange right, and I found that it was difficult to find a perfect orange tone. So what I did is I got a nice bright orange, which everyone seems to do, and I think is just a bit too bright, especially for a helmet you're going to weather. And then I use a sort of darker, more burnt orange over the top, but I spray it from about 1 meter away, so you just get this sort of splattering. Obviously it's hard to mix spray paints, but if you do it this way, it does blend in nicely, and again it adds a bit of weathering to your colour, which isn't just like, you know, black. And it tones that bright orange down a bit and just gives a really nice blend, and it also gives this beautiful kind of textured feel. So I totally recommend this technique, using 2 paints, base colour and then a darker one sprayed from a lot further away, and a lot of, you know, really light, like tiny little sprinkling. I spray it into the air and just sort of let it settle, and yeah, it looks beautiful as the end result. Here you go. Alright, back to the stencil. So before I paint, I'm just drawing around the outline of his face and his arms and stuff in pencil, just so I know what I'm going to do with the colouring, because yeah, it's just easier to have a guideline. And then once I've done that, I can start the colouring. So I'm just doing the brown back piece here. See, it's so much easier just to have a pencil guideline, because, you know, once the paint's on, it's on, and it's quite difficult to get off. I am just using spray paint here, which I literally spray into a lid and then just use a brush as normal. Of course you can use acrylic or whatever. I just find spray paint's a bit more definite and oomph, you know, especially when you blending it with the other kind of high quality spray painted accents. For the outline, I'm not that accurate with a paintbrush, so I'm actually just using a black Sharpie here. Et voila! Not bad for doing everything by hand, right? I mean, you can probably get away with doing the actual body by hand, but I just wanted the sizing right, and, you know, there we go, that's the decal that I used as reference. There is another tone of teal on there, but I couldn't be bothered with that. I think it looks fine and dandy without. You can of course buy decals, but I just like to do things by hand, my way. Okay, so here I'm just prepping a visor for the actual Macrobinoculars, and I'm just using the same stuff that I use for the helmet visor itself, which is a replacement grinder shield. You can of course use Perspex, but you know, it's just so much easier to cut things with scissors. It was a bit of a nightmare to place this in, you know. I didn't think of this when designing the model, but maybe, you know, I could have put some kind of recessed lines in so I could just slot it into place, but you know, it's not a big deal. I just cut it to size and then used milliputs to keep it in place, exactly the same as the helmet visor itself. And then it's just a case of gluing everything together. I basically just sand the edges of the parts with 120 just to give a nice key, dab of super glue, and then I just use masking tape to hold everything into place. Alright, so it's time for a bit of weathering. So I'm just using an airbrush here, and I start off with a nice brown, and I've got this weird technique where I sort of use the dry brush method but with my airbrush, you know, rather than painting on some paint with a brush and then wiping it straight off. I use the airbrush, and the reason is, it's weird, but because you mix airbrush paint with a thinner, so there's sort of a bit of alcohol in there, if you spray it and then wipe it off, you get this really weird effect which doesn't look, it's not the same as the dry brush method where it's just sort of like a wash over the helmet. You get these weird indistinct marks of where you put the actual kitchen roll or whatever you're using to wipe it off. And I just find it gives a real nice realistic worn look rather than an obvious weathered look. I go around the helmet and I start to ding it up a bit just with a bit of sandpaper, because obviously, you know, a nice smooth dome, you're not going to be able to get a lot of weathering on there other than sort of spots or shading, which looks cool, and I do that as well, but you want a bit of battle damage on there, or at least my customer wanted some battle damage. So anywhere that you scrape and then you put some paint over it, it's going to stay in those scrape marks, right? It's going to go into the recesses and just look super cool and realistic. Don't go crazy, you can easily get carried away here, like with weathering, less is definitely more. But my customer wanted it quite, you know, he wanted it to look like it's come out of the Battle of Umbara, but a realistic rendition of it. And that episode is just so dark and grim, and you know, so many clones die, that I wanted the finished result of this helmet to look really quite just battle worn and bruised and just kind of, I don't know the word, violent, epic, beaten up, basically. Alright, I've left the Macrobinoculars overnight for the super glue to cure, so it's time to just take all that masking tape off and see what's what, and then I'll start weathering this. You can see that super glue expands about 4 times, so even though you put little dabs on, it's still going to seep out a bit. And what I do to get rid of the excess is I just grab my craft knife and cut along the edges and underneath, and then just pull it away, basically. Simple. Alright, so exactly the same process for the weathering on the Macrobinoculars. I didn't show it on the helmet, I don't think, but I basically do a brown layer and then a black layer on top. That mix just seems to work really well to give sort of natural dirt. And again, I'm just spraying it with the airbrush and then wiping it off as I go along. I have my airbrush set to, I sort of bent the needle up a bit, which gives a nice sort of spattering. I don't mind that in places. Oh, here you go. I'm going along. So I've done the brown on the helmet, and now I'm just doing exactly the same with the black all over. Okay, so I'm just swapping my needle over here to get rid of that splattering one that I mentioned. So I can then just do things a little bit more detailed, then I've got a little bit more control over the shading. I'm going over all those scratches that I mentioned with the sandpaper and concentrating on those a bit, because when you have like a real sort of scar and some airbrushing around it, it tends to look like a blast mark, you know, like it's literally being shot with, and it's laser burn. And I'm just wiping around, finessing. This is where it's easy to get lost, and it's quite a meditative process where you're building up the weathering. It's also very easy to get carried away and do too much. So I think I also went around this with a bit of isopropyl and diluted some areas, but you've got to be careful with that because it's very, very you know, deliberate marks when you're wiping things off, and you can wipe the white paint off underneath. But yeah, this is me basically going, wow, I got carried away with myself. I'm just gonna bring that back a bit and go from there. Okay, so as this was my first waxer build, the first Macrobinoculars sort of test build of the model, there's always a little bit of, you know, experimentation and finessing you need to do. So the holes weren't big enough for the M4 nuts and bolts that I had, so I'm just drilling them out here. Very, very easily done. PLA drills quite nicely, and I'm just, yeah, testing the mechanism basically. So what I ended up doing is grabbing an M4 bolt, I stick a washer on, and then I thread that from the inside out, and then I put another washer on, then the Macrobinoculars itself, and then it goes through the ear, and then I put the nut on, and then finally the comlink ear blocks are actually hollowed out to sort of hide that nut. And basically I went all the way through there because it's the most stable, secure kind of mechanism for the whole thing, and it works really well. Alright, so I'm starting to stencil here for the tube stripes. You can do this at any stage really. You should probably do it before the weathering, but it doesn't really matter. Basically there's 9 tube stripes, and they sort of start to flow a little bit forwards towards the front, so I just use pinstripe tape and mask all the outer areas and spray it up. I used again the two-tone method, so I start with a sort of mid-range blue, and then I go over it with like grey black, just so it doesn't look as kind of shiny and perfect. And again, it's very hard to get perfect tones of spray paint, so if I don't have it, I just kind of, you know, wing it, make it up on the job. But I really do like this two-tone kind of texturing method. Next up is Waxer has this cool battle droid drawing stencil thing, hand-drawn thing on the dome of his helmet. So I'm doing this by hand in pencil first, just to get all the proportions right, and then, you know, I can rub bits off and change it if I need to. And then I start to go over it with a black Sharpie. and then of course doing his kill count. I think I started with a red Sharpie here, and it's just doesn't work very well, you know, once you've weathered the helmet. So I think I just drew this and then went over it in red paint, just so it's a bit more obvious, and you get the nice kind of brush strokes, and it just looks better, much better. Alright, so once you are happy with all your paintwork, it's time to lacquer it up. So I use a matte lacquer, I use high coat. I find it works really, really well, and again I do my crazy by hand uppy method, downy method, and then all over. I tend to do 2 coats of matte lacquer, and of course do all your accessories as well. So now it's time to install the Macrobinoculars proper. Of course I tested it before painting and finishing and finalizing, so I knew it was going to work, because there's nothing worse than, you know, finishing something and making it look beautiful and then it not actually logistically working. So I knew it was all going to work. Again, the order is a bolt and a washer threaded from the inside of the helmet out, then another washer, then thread that through the Macrobinocular arm, then another washer, and then I dab the glue for the ears, which the bolt then threads through again, and finally the nut, and then align that all up, and then finally glue the comm link, which has a hollowed out hole to cover all the gubbins basically, and then it's super tight all the way through, and I have a screwdriver on the inside holding the nut, and then the bolt, sorry, and then I tighten the nut with some pliers on the outside, get everything lined up, straightened. Obviously keep glue away from the areas that are going to be articulated, and make sure everything's lined up and straight. Alright, it's time to do the silver parts, which is basically the nose grill and the rebreathers. So I just use normal window screen here, I spray it in a chrome, and then I bend it over the rebreathers, and I just install the nose grill with hot glue, nice and easy. Okay, so time to just glue in the rebreathers. I really need to modify this area, because once you start filling, they fit perfectly when they're printed, but once you start putting the rebreathers and the front comm link chip in, because it's got that extra layerage, you sort of have to scrape them out, or I think even here I use the soldering iron just to cut it out a bit more, and then just glue into place as normal, dab of masking tape, done.
there you go. I hope you enjoyed that video. I shot that just a couple of weeks ago, sort of towards the end of autumn here in the UK, at a place called Kirkstall Abbey in Leeds, which is like an 800-year-old abbey, and I was really happy. I got that beautiful yellow tree just falling, the leaves falling. It's absolutely stunning. And initially, I don't know why I shot it there. I just thought like ruins, you know, battle, war. It might fit into a Star Wars world. And then when I actually put the video together and added the music, I was like, oh, it's actually like an homage to Waxer. It's kind of like this is clone heaven. That's where my mind went to. Anyway, I don't know where yours did. But yeah, it is now winter here. It started snowing this morning all day today for the first time in Yorkshire. Winter is here, my friends. So I thought I'd pour myself a nice glass of red wine. Lovely jubbly. Oh, it is if you are a 3D printer yourself, if you own a 3D printer and you print helmets, I have a special offer all the way through December where it's buy one, gift one free. So if you and a mate have a 3D printer, you can buy a file, right? And then you put your mate's name and email address and whatever file you want to gift them, and I will send them it for free. Literally for free. It's buy one, gift one free. I thought I'd just do something nice for you guys to do something nice to give people early Christmas presents. So, free 3D files. Wow, that is hard to say. Yeah. Proviso. That's not the right word, is it? Basically important legal stuff, GDPR and all that. You can't just give me someone's email address, because you know you have to ask their permission. So just go, hey dude, can I what's your email address? Can I send it to this? You know, I've got a secret special gift for you, but I need your email address. If they say yes, then you can do it. If they say no, then you can't do it. Okay, I don't want to be getting into trouble. But yeah, all the way through December, buy one, gift one free. Let me know if you want anything in the way of Star Wars content, videos, builds, new 3D files, new designs. If you want a helmet that you want to see me make and I've never made it, or one of my collection that I have made, I've not made a video yet, let me know in the comments down below what you want to see and I will do it. I'm active on here. Yeah, don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, and hopefully you're already following me on here. Subscribe, hit the bell, all that crap, because it, you know, helps the algorithm. Oh, it's late here and it's winter, and I'm drinking red wine. So, yeah. Right, be gone with you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for commenting and messaging and chatting to me. Thank you for ordering from me. Go and visit my website, www.jeddaworkshop.co.uk. Right, bye. See you later. Thanks. Take care and peace be with you. If I don't see you again, have a wonderful Christmas to you and your family. I hope you get lots of presents. I hope you drink lots. I hope you eat lots. I hope you fall asleep lots. I hope you get to go sledging. Yeah, just have fun and be merry. Thank you very much. Namaste. This is the way.
Doesn't sound so bad to me.